Hi, I'm John Plematash again. I'm bringing you One Life, One Story, and basically trying to bring some clarification to the Bible. Not by me. Be honest with you, I'm not smart enough to do that, so I'm going to use what God has shared with me. The first thing we're going to do is go through Genesis 1. And I'm going to call that the chaotic creation. But before I can start with Genesis 1, I got my trusty King James Bible right here. Alright, I'm going to be reading right out of it, so I don't want to mess his words up. But I told you in my intro, this book did not need written until we fell. It is not an actual story of creation per se that you can just say, yeah, this is it. This is God's word, it's the truth. First of all, it is God's word. And second of all, it is the truth. But not according to anything scientific. Not by any timelines. Don't validate God with science. There's going to be points in science that do validate God. But don't use science to validate God. Okay? We needed no instructions on life until we fell. We didn't need writings. We didn't need a book. We didn't need any other source of intelligence. Because the whole time God created, when He finally created us, we were in His thoughts, His mind. Nobody else's. Everything was one. Animals didn't attack us. We didn't eat meat. Everything lived peacefully. The angels lived with us, and they were servants to us to make sure our world was right so we could live. That's where the problem stems from, but we'll get to that. You got to understand that we were all in God's thoughts. I told you I'll have a chapter or a video on thoughts. We go over that. Everything was in God's thoughts. So, if you understand it, I can't emphasize that enough. Because you'll never understand the Bible unless you understand that. That's why I have a whole section or a whole video on thoughts. So let me start by just start reading this chapter. There's a ton of information in this chapter, and I don't want my mind to just go running off, so bear with me as I go through this. Alright, chapter 1 of Genesis, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Yes, God created the heavens for, and I told you in the intro, celestial beings and celestial objects. And He invented the earth for terrestrial beings. But those celestial beings in the beginning lived with us. We could see them, we knew them, everything was just going. I mean, they were here to make sure everything that God assigned them was done. Alright? There'll be hopefully more details on it, best I can. In verse 2. Now this is an interesting verse. Because I sat in my little study here, I don't know how many years ago it was. It wasn't that many. 2 or 3. And I read this verse. And then I heard God ask me what I saw in this verse. And I said, I didn't know. So let me read this verse, and then I'll finish going over that with you. And it says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Kind of hit that on the intro. He's the living water. Alright. And He gives all life from this. And when God asked me, He says, what do you see? I said, I don't know. God asked me 5 times, what do I see in this verse? And I told him, I don't know. I don't get what you're asking. And then he changed the question and he went, how many faces do you see? And I don't know why that clicked, but as soon as he asked that, I went, 2. And then I had some struggles with that because they're not entities. God is not an entity. But there's 2 faces. They're things that are. They are, God is. So the second entity is. It just is. A good way to explain that is, I know God made light like the sun and stuff, but God is the light. So light always is. It don't change. Another thing you can use is like gravity. Gravity on Earth is the same as gravity on Mars, with maybe some different math formulas that go with it, but it's the same. It's gravity. It isn't going to change. It is. There's people out there going, oh, God made everything. He made the light. He made gravity. Just go with me on this. It is. In the end, life is. Life on Mars, life on Earth, celestial life, terrestrial life is all given by one life. One is, one source. Gravity's one source. Light is one source. Okay, and it's key to understand that, because what I'm going to tell you next is when we break that verse down, the earth hasn't been formed. No place to live for anybody. Water isn't even divided yet. But darkness was upon the face of the deep. Now, darkness in the Bible is mostly used as a reference for evil. But there is no evil in God. That's why there's 2 faces. Because evil is. And you can sit there and you can try and go, oh no, God made evil too. Yes, he wrote that in the Bible. He even said he made evil. But not in this context. When he said he made evil later in the Bible, he's talking about us. He created us and we just can't do any good. And I told you in my intro, we got to really understand good. We don't do good. We're in sin. We're corrupted. We're evil. And you can still sit there and go, but God made evil. God did this. No. God knows evil. God knows of evil. But he did not make evil. The real test for that is in God's own words. You cannot get clean water and dirty water from the same tap. People out there go, oh, but you can put a filter on it. Well, filters fail. That's a man thought. You could not have good and evil come from the same source. There's opposing forces out there. Opposing sources out there. God knew that. And when he created the celestial beings, they knew that. And they weren't to share it. Okay? I mean, when you look at it, God created, he was here, then he created the angels, the celestial beings. And we got to go over that real quick too here. Told you my mind will, sorry. But anyway, and they, in God's theories, he's on the bottom, angels are here, and somewhere in here we're terrestrial beings. You know, there's levels. God's on the bottom, angels, terrestrials, and people like to say we were made higher than the angels. Okay, because they served us. If we look at man's setting, we put our freaking leaders on top, his cronies underneath, and all the low lifes that they think we are on the bottom. And they treat us like that. But I'm not going down that road. So, they're inverted. And that's kind of this same story. Darkness is here, leads from the top down. Good, leads from the bottom up. Alright. So darkness is on the face of the deep. We know it's evil. But then it said the Spirit of God. What's important in that statement is God introduces himself as a spirit. God's going to make a family. They can only be spirits. Alright. Moved upon the face of the waters. I already told you he's the living water. And the spirits, that's the word we need to hit. When we look at those spirits, I've already told you God made two types of beings that I know of, my understanding, in the beginning. And it's got to be said exactly like this. He made the spirit angel beings, and he made the spirit human beings. And this is important because when we get back to chapter 3, some stuff's going to change. But anyway, you notice I said spirit first because that's what we are. I could do a quick test and run down the road and look at people and go, what are you? And they'll tell me they're the mailman, they're a woman, they're a human being, they're a man, they're living flesh and blood. Nobody will ever tell me they're a spirit. And we got all kinds of people out there going, I'm more spiritual than I am. Duh. Your dad's a spirit. You come from spirits. You are a spirit. There's no logic needed there. So let's run down through these next few verses and see what's going on and see if we can keep breaking this down. Verse 3, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Again, dividing the waters, ingredients in the waters, and the places they need to go. And maybe some external stuff. I don't know. Not in to figure out how he did it. God saw light and that it was good. Well, God's light, God is good, but also the lighting of things helps life keep regenerating. The actual light that's shining. So he divides the light from the darkness. Only makes sense that the two can't mix. If they're not divided, can you imagine before he divided them how freaking corrupt everything was? How bad everything was? You can't even picture a place like that. Then he called, in verse 5, the light day, the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And that's kind of important because he's assigning the angels to control all that. And days and time. Because our crops and all that, you know, we know life has cycles, and yes, science validates that, but don't use science to validate God. It just says we agree with God when we say that. Then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters. In verse 7 it said, God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. Verse 8, and God called the firmament heaven, or the celestial beings' home. True home. Another dimension we can't see. In them days they could see it. Everything was visible in the beginning. We lost that visibility. And the evening and the morning were the second day. So now the angels, or spirit angel beings, have their own. They can start doing their duties to help God finish what he's doing. Okay? God does, what's the word I'm looking for? Assign duties, but And God said in verse 9, he didn't just say, I'm going to do this. And God thought and said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. Well, we can see he's starting to form a home for the spirit human beings. In verse 10, and God called the dry land earth. The gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw it was good. It was good. Very important to understand that word good. And it won't come together till later. Why I keep saying that. In verse 11, and God thought and said, let the earth bring forth grass, herb yielding seed, fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind, and God saw that it was good. Now, it would be kind of foolish if God made some place and didn't provide food for us before we got here. So he's setting all that up. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Alright, we're moving right along. You need to understand something. Since nothing had to be written till we fell, and we didn't need the knowledge to come back to God, or the training to find our way back to God, this could have been millions of years. It could have been 6 minutes. It could have been whatever. It doesn't matter. God doesn't care if we know that. The reason why I keep saying this book didn't need written and to not use science and all that stuff is because this is a message. When I used a ball of water as a vision to kind of get the message across to me, that's all it was. I didn't say it was scientific. I didn't say it was real. I just said that's how God got his point across to me. This is how God's getting his point across to humanity. It doesn't tell you how old the earth is. It doesn't tell you none of that stuff. And he doesn't care if you know. Can't say that enough. So, he's now made a place for the angels, a place for the human beings. He's gave the human beings some food, and he's going to assign duties to the angels. And so they have timing. So our life has a timing to it. We can grow crops or whatever. Not we grow crops, because that's very wrong. That's against the Bible. We don't grow nothing on the first day. There was no man to till the ground. Dang, almost messed that one up. It happens through what the angels do and the spirit beings do in natural life. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of heaven to give the light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also, celestial beings giving rules and guides on how life should go. Alright. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night. They can't rule over it unless they got their duties to do it. And to divide the light from darkness, because evil and good can't be put together, nor can light and darkness. And God saw it was good. Alright, so in verse 19, in the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Again, I don't care how many years, whatever. God doesn't care if I know that. This is a message. It's conveying a message on an evolutionary process that he used that we don't have a grasp on. And he doesn't care if we get that grasp. One being did have a grasp on it and thought he knew everything and set out to change things. Okay. And God said, let the waters, in verse 20, bring forth abundantly the moving creature that has life, fowl that may fly above the earth, in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw it was good. God does something different in verse 22 here. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the 5th day. That is a huge statement. That has stories that just go with it. Man. Alright. We're going to go over that. I got to remember to come back to it. We're going to do it. In verse 24, and God thought and said, let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and the beast of the earth after his kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw it was good. I'm going to have to come back to beast, because this is going to explain some of that evolutionary process. Alright. Creation. Going to verse 26, and God said, let us make man in our image. Here's where I got to stop and expand on this a little bit. You hear so many discussions on what in our image is. I've already explained it to you from verse 2. God introduced himself as a spirit. What are you? You're a spirit. You're in his image. Not necessarily this fleshly body, because it's going to go away. But the spirit's still there. There's so many people that have so many different ways of explaining it. It's no harder than that. You're a spirit, God's a spirit. God's your Father. God gave you life, and life is a gift. It's a gift that we abuse and do not appreciate. Alright? So God said, let us make man in our image. And I shouldn't even say man. Let us make Adam in our image, if I use the Greek and Hebrew text. Alright? We'll stick with man for now. After our likeness, spirits. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man, in verse 27 again, his own image, in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Let's stop. A lot just happened there. God gave dominion to Adam. Adam is every living man before we fell. You find that in the Hebrew and Greek text. Somebody in their genius, God went over this with me, decided everything was going to be called man. God will change names when God's ready to change names. Abram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah, Lucifer to Satan, doesn't matter. Jacob to Israel. Excuse me. It's not our job to change the names. Period. So, saying that, he gave us dominion. What that means is he delegated the authority to the spirit human beings in the flesh on earth over the creation on earth, because I said it's a chaotic creation. I'm soon here in a few minutes going to explain what God was doing, why it was chaotic. But when he gave us that dominion, that delegated authority, it gave us the right to do what he did. He couldn't. So since he served from the bottom for, I'm going to use my finger, he could do nothing on earth unless he went through the flesh. So we would have enough delegated authority to do what he does and take care of what was needed on earth. Well, that's the number one reason why Jesus had to come. Because when we get later in chapter 3, we give up this dominion. God has nothing to go through now. He has to take each one of us individually in the Old Testament, give us laws and rules, and try and tell us to come back. Try and fix things. And we're going to kind of go over that here in a second, but in a different way. Alright. Jesus had to be in the flesh so God could reestablish the kingdom, reestablish the earth, reestablish everything. The original way it was set up, because we got to day 7 through this process, and all was good then. So he had to have Jesus, and Jesus is called the second Adam, to go through that flesh. Now the key is, since we're in sin and we fell, you hear all these people out there telling you, God's giving you your dominion. Jesus said I got to stop. Jesus gave you your dominion, and you can just operate. You have dominion over everything on earth. You just tell it to stop. No. You're not bigger than God. Jesus had to be in the flesh so God could work through him. And Jesus always said, I can only do what my Father tells me. Jesus was never, he was God, but he was never purely God because he was in flesh. God had to work through that flesh. Okay, now we have to do the same thing God does. We cannot command a thing to happen without a belief on Jesus. We have to believe and know that he came in the flesh so we can operate through his flesh. That's why we got to pray in his name. Anything we ask for, in Jesus' name. In Jesus' body. We eat his flesh. We gotta have that. God has it. We ain't no bigger than God. God needs it to operate. We're not bigger than God. So all these people just tell you got the dominion to command things out. They're really out in left field. So anyway, that was the big thing on dominion. And when God, and God blessed them and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Now, I said it was chaotic. I said this is a chaotic creation. This part you have to get. Adam was not just one man. Adam was all men. To my understanding with what God's saying. Because we can, like I say, don't use science to validate God, but we can use their points to understand God. If you watch these TV specials about human beings and their development, I don't know the exact numbers, so don't come shoot me, but they say there's like 27 different kinds of Homo sapiens human beings, and they got this tree all drawn out, and they don't know what happened to all of them. They all disappeared. We find bones, we find We know there's giants. The Bible tells there's giants. We're trying to find the giants. They say somebody's trying to cover that up. I don't know. I don't care. God said there's giants, there's giants. God said there's beings, there's beings. But this is also what God said. This book is about God creating things. But in his creation process, evil would come in and corrupt what he was creating. He'd smack it down. And he'd keep that process going until all was good. Because evil is. He knows it's there. He couldn't let evil come in. He'd have to keep smacking it down. So when God was showing me this picture of all these other little Homo sapien human being tree thing that science likes to say, oh, these, he asked me, where are they now? They're gone. Because they didn't play by what his thoughts were. His mindset was. His will was. They would work against him. Evil would come in. He'd smack them down until it was good. They're all gone except for us. We made it into the Garden of Eden. We made it into perfection. We showed the ability to do that. We didn't keep it. We gave it up. But with that one hope, God never turned his back on us. He knew we could make it back. Sorry, but he knew we could make it back. So he wrote a book to tell us how to do it. A message. Not a scientific document, not a fact, a message of truth and hope. All right. Another thing is you're going to find out is back here he made plants and fruits, and then he went in to making birds and fish and animals, and he started speaking to them. I don't really think he spoke to him. You could probably say he thought to him. Because there's something all these creatures have in common. And we never talk about it. You got to remember, this is what God shared with me. I'm really not smart enough to know all this. Right? All these creatures have brains. God, I'm going to tell a bigger story on this later. But when all the brains are in God's thoughts, in God's will, we live in peace and harmony. And he achieved that when we reached day 7. That's why he had a chaotic creation. Because he had to keep smacking that evil back. Because evil will not put all the brains in alignment. So let's get on. We're going to go over that more. I told you I'm going to write I have a section on thoughts. But there's just, the story just keeps growing if you just keep pushing through this. I could end up telling the whole story right now. All the rest of this book right now from this one passage. Alright. So, when he said replenish the earth and subdue it, all the beings that were beat down and because they were evil and wouldn't follow his rules till we got to the Garden of Eden and good, we're replenishing that. To me, that's not hard to see. So in verse 28, and God blessed him. God said unto him, be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, and subdue it. Subdue it, because we can operate at the same authority, the same power he's at, and make sure evil stays battened down. We don't want it to overtake us. Then you have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you so shall it be for meat. Verse 20, that was verse 29. Verse 30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. See, here's another example of God making a correction. I'm just sitting around, I'm reading this, and he starts pointing to beast. Beast. I told you when I was over there in beast, I'd come back to it. Beast. He says, weren't there dinosaurs on the earth? To my knowledge, again, not science, not validating God, but giving me something to work with, to learn about God. I said, yes. He said, did any of them eat meat? Not meat is the meat he called here. This is all plants and fruits. He says, did any of them eat meat with the blood? And it's just to my knowledge, yes, they did. I didn't know it for a fact, but I would believe that piece of knowledge. But for some reason, we can't just believe God, or there is a God. It's amazing how that works. Gotta quit doing that to me. Anyway, he says, some ate meat with the blood. Are they here today? And I went, no. And he said, I made a correction. So he could get to day 7, because they were not living within his will, within his thoughts, or within what our brains were doing. Okay. In verse 31, it closes out this chapter. It says, and God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. He now got the very good. Alright. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. Hopefully you can see, I was trying to explain how evil kept coming up. He had to keep smacking it down to make good. Because good and evil can't be in the same place. Life couldn't begin with corruption. Because it's that corrupt life that kills. And it brings death. Life can't start with death. Life can't start with killing. Alright. I don't know how else or what else I could add to this, because the rest of these stories are going to add to it more and more. I will say one thing about chapter 1. You'll notice it said God said, God this, God that. Chapter 2, that's going to change. And that's going to be part of what we're going to learn in chapter 2. But day 7 is a day of perfection. We're living in perfection. You and I had made it there. Or beings like us, not us personally. and we gave it away. If you want to test the theory on how we gave that away, if we're in perfection, name one thing from that point in time we haven't changed. Before I answer that, I'm going to close. I'll bring that up in chapter 2. But I want you to think about it between this video and that video. To me, it holds a lot of answers, but we're a hard-hearted being when we get told that many times. Again, I should have prayed before I started this chapter that God opens our eyes, opens our ears, opens our hearts to teach us to understand His Word. I didn't come at this like, yeah, I know everything and everything I said exact. I don't know science. I don't know all this stuff. This is just how God explained it to me. And it makes sense. So, with that said, I'm going to close. I'm going to pray for y'all and say, I hope y'all get this. Y'all need to get this before you understand what the rapture and tribulation is. My heart goes out to y'all. You don't know how much. And if this is how much it is for me, I can only imagine what God feels. Love y'all.